Director of Finance, Ms. Ortega.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Keeley, you have quorum.
Thank you very much, Lamont. Okay, item 9 on the agenda.
Yep.
Item 9 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the April 5th, 2017 Investment Committee session, open session. It's been moved by Ms. Hedrick, seconded by Ms. Dillon to approve the open session minutes. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Abstain? Ms. Yamamoto is abstained. Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is our CIO, Chris Ailman's open session report. Chris, all you.
Thanks, Harry. So Pat always wants to know the magic number. Back in April, we hit 206 billion, so we did cross through 200. I'm pleased to say that at the end of May, we crossed 209 billion. Actually, it might have been June. No, yeah, it was May 31st. So that's where we sit right now. Obviously, with Harry, we'll knock on wood and throw salt, whatever we have to do to get limp to June 30. We are trying to get to June 30. But obviously, at this point, a very spectacular year. Thankfully, double-digit kind of numbers. And as we've discussed, the non-U.S. stocks are doing quite well. And it's kind of interesting when you look back over various time periods. The best performing part of the market so far in this fiscal year is really large growth stocks. So large stocks are beating small stocks, growth stocks are beating value. But the emerging markets are actually producing amongst the highest returns, almost 20% kind of rates of return. So very strong. Non-U.S. stocks are beating U.S. stocks, which I think surprises people given the Brexit, the trouble in, Greece hasn't changed one bit. Greece is still Greece. Portugal still has its mortgage problems. And Japan really hasn't grown much. But with all the international news we see, that those markets have still continued to hang in there. But double-digit returns out of both the U.S. and the non-U.S. equity market. Lower returns out of fixed income as we expected, but not negative. Because interest rates have climbed, but not very rapidly. So you're still clipping coupons, and fixed income's around a 3% return for the fiscal year. So very interesting time period. And then when you look over really long time periods, you're going to go through a period where you're going to see some pretty disparate numbers. So a 5-year return that might be a low single digit, but then a 10-year return that would be a high double digit. And then a 15-year return that's back to a low single digit. And that's simply because now when you think about 10 years back, we're reflecting to 07, so we're picking up right before the global financial crisis. When you go back 15 years, you're picking up the boom before it, but then 20 years, you're picking up the end of the 90s and the internet bubble burst. So you've got 2 severe bear markets and 2 severe recessions. So whenever in the paper or on the news, you see 10, 15, and 20-year returns, just try and think to yourself, time period really does matter. And a 15-year return is one thing, but a 20-year return picks up a whole different period of time. And I'm starting to see that with financial advisors and money managers being very clever and crafty with the time periods they pick. I saw somebody with a 17-and-a-half-year time period, which I thought, okay, I could see you starting in 2000, but in, halfway through 99, I don't get that. So, but it is, just to give you an idea, the 10-year return in emerging markets is 2.4%. The 15-year return is 10. So that 5 years at the beginning of that time period, very dramatic. Then you jump out to 20 years, it's back below 5% again. So very disparate results over time periods, and just be careful for that. And there we go. So here's our asset allocation back as of April. It's not dramatically different when you bring it forward to May. We are within the ranges, as we've talked about. We're fairly low in fixed income, continue to be low in private equity. Not that we aren't committing money there, but the managers are not drawing it down as fast. And because the overall denominator keeps growing, which is a nice problem to have. So that's a good thing. We saw a recent presentation from Cambridge that felt that the tide on private equity would shift, that we'd actually start seeing more capital drawn than distributed. And that really just has to do with that time frame lag, the fact that you're selling assets in 06, 07, and those are slowing down. Real estate, you can see how RMS is jumping. We're going to talk about that later in open session, how quickly RMS is growing. And we're going to even making allocations at June 1st here recently, and maybe even another one before year end. And then the cash position is up to 3 in this time period. It's going to be closer to about 2, 1.5, 2 probably in the next couple of months, because as we discussed, I have to say it, summer is the dry period in our cash flow, and teachers don't work, so we don't get contributions, much in the way of contributions. Wasn't nearly as effective in open session. Thank you. We'll be here all day. What?
Ms. Yamamoto, weigh in because I was just thinking the same thing. For the record. Ms. Yamamoto.
Teachers do work all year round.
Thank you. Good. That is corrected. Yes, they do. My daughter, I think I might have mentioned it, but just since we're on the air, I can broadcast it. My daughter is finished her first year of teaching. Yay. And for a reward, they gave her a little pink card and said, bye. Yeah, so her last day of school was, I knew that was going to be emotional for her, but it was real emotional because she's no longer at that school. So, but she's interviewing. She had an interview yesterday, and she has an interview next week. So, thank you. I will pass that on to her. Can I give an advertisement out? No, I won't. So here is the U.S. equity market. Fiscal year to date, up 17 as of last week. You can see that all-time record high. I've written this in the past where I've said it's a tale of two cities, good times and bad times. And sure enough, up until Election Day, the market was very flat, almost unchanged, but then it has rallied. A lot of people have really postulated that a lot of that just had to do with last year. The market was really held down because of all the negative news. I think at one point the Obama administration estimated that a whole 1% was taken off of GDP just because of the constant pounding of election news was just so bad. But obviously the market's optimistic. What's really important is, I always say, is look at corporate earnings. We do not pay attention to Washington that much. It doesn't drive the economy. It's a reactionary thing mostly. What we care about is corporate earnings. Corporate earnings are better. And then the internals to the market are not too bad. So I passed out something where I asked the board, one of the questions was, what's FANG? Because not a lot of people know what FANG is, but it is a new phrase you will hear all the time. I think I'm probably the only person that remembered it was the name Phyllis Diller gave her husband. Thank you. I had to look that up, but I didn't know anything about Harry Potter's dog. Yeah, but very interesting to look back over time, and I think the market volatility surprises people. So here's a longer picture over 3 years, and you can really see that, I can take this all the way back to March 9th of 2009. That's really when this bull market started. I told you in 15, I'll tell you again, I told you in 16, and I'll tell you in 17, it is long in the tooth. It's old for a bull market, but bull markets don't die of age. They do tend to kind of run out of steam, and maybe we exhibited that in 15 and 16, and now we're having a renewed market. There still is the risk of a recession somewhere out on the horizon. People are still very worried because the U.S. economy is very, very weak. As we've said, 1.5% to maybe 2% growth, which is frankly pathetic. Maybe I'm getting mad. There we go. So you're an average of the last 3 years of about 8.2. That'll show up. We care about 3 years because that's what we use in the fiscal year report and for the actuary. So we're actually pretty darn close to the long-term average we expect for U.S. stocks. So if I climb up on the crow's nest and look out on the horizon, obviously geopolitically, North Korea has to jump to the top of the list. I've told you before, to repeat, one of our staff listened to a speech by Condoleezza Rice in December. And when they asked her what should the new president worry about, she said North Korea, North Korea, North Korea. So I think that is still a big, big concern. The list up there has not changed dramatically on everything else. Obviously, internet hacking, with the ransom virus, we are seeing such widespread abuse. And then even lately, some implications that the whole issue in the Middle East this week might have been due to hacking rather than actions. So I think the biggest risk we continue to face, and I hear it pounded over and over at every conference, is lower for longer. That we're going to have a very low return for a long time period. That said, I just showed you the 3-year return on stocks is 8%. And the 10-year return in stocks, if I glance down, 7% is the, through May 31 is the Russell 3000. Over 20 years, 7.6. Over 30 years, 9.8. So people like to say that, but I think there are questions to that. The positives list is getting very short, but I would say, and there are 2 caution points, which are assets remain at all-time high prices, and the fact that we're late in this stage of the recovery. There are some economists who feel that without some actual changes in policy, we'll be heading for a recession maybe in the 2 years. And as we discussed, our house view as a staff is a little bit more pessimistic than we are optimistic looking out in the next year ahead. There we go. Questions?
So Alan and Steve, just as much to you as Chris. So Chris, you've given us some, in my point of view, pretty great numbers for some of those returns over those years. Did we jump too quickly to lower our assumed rate of return? And it's not like we jumped really quick at it, but
You asking me or these guys?
it's probably for Alan and Steve.
Yeah.
But if you want to weigh in too, Chris, feel free.
No.
Okay.
No.
I thought for sure you'd just say ditto. Thanks, Steve.
Ms. Hendricks?
Chris, I was wondering if you could, in the report you gave us, looking at the global maps on page, INV 31, where you have the growth outlook, the forecast trends and global growth, and then you gave us a map of our market exposures. And can you kind of compare and contrast those? Because there were things that struck me as interesting, like China dropping off. You said the top 10 country exposure, Japan being 7% when Japan's been pretty flat. So I guess, that's those are interesting maps to me in terms of looking at, and especially Russia, that was interesting in terms of global growth. So, and the consultants can weigh in too, but I just find that interesting to contrast sort of global growth with our exposure, and wondering if you could just comment on that.
Yeah. So for the public and the rest of the board, Sharon's flipping between INV 31 and then 32. And I would say, Sharon, the map on 32 is really driven by our asset allocation. And the fact that we're very long-term investors and we're somewhat passive. We've had that debate about whether we're really passive or really active. We've always said as a staff, we're pretty heavily tilted to passive, and particularly in the public assets. And so that is the map of the world if you are a global investor. And the fact that the U.S. weighting, as you know, June just showed you, the U.S. weighting of the equity market is only about 54%. But then if you overlaid the world's fixed income market, you'd realize that the U.S. is a huge part of that because we're a debtor nation, so we borrow a lot of money. And then particularly when you think about real estate, private equity, those portfolios are going to be always tilted to home. So that's why you've got the non-U.S. weighting is as low as it is. And China for us is considered an emerging market in a lot of parts of the economy, a large part of the portfolios and in the asset classes, even though it's the second largest economy in the world. And we've discussed that several of them are ready to move it to a full weighting if they free float the currency. So then when you come back to page 31, that is using the IMF forecast of just where they think GDP will be in the next year. So if you were an active manager, you would probably tilt your portfolio that way and underweight, Brazil and China and Japan and New Zealand, poor New Zealand. But Canada, I think it's interesting that they're forecasting a recession in Canada, yet very bullish on Russia, because both of those are driven primarily by oil. But that really is if you were active and had faith in economic forecasts. But I think for us, it's just kind of a backdrop of, we need GDP growth to earn that 7%. And now we need it just sort of around the world, but we really are still going to have a home country bias in the overall asset allocation because of the private asset classes.
So the growth outlook you're saying the growth outlook chart on 31 really is a 1-year projection?
Yes, sorry, is a
Okay.
1-year
That's
forward
actually very
forecast
helpful.
by the IMF of what they think might happen around the world.
Does the IMF do longer-term projections? 5, 10-year projections?
I think I've seen a 3-year overall GDP growth, but I haven't seen country by country 5 and 10 at all.
I think this whole, conversation about, we're such long-term investors and how to think, more longer term and get projections that are more, because it's interesting to look at this, but in terms of how it relates to how we make decisions, it seems like
I
how
think
helpful is
the
it?
hard thing to look at is that these are economic forecasts. And remember, economists are not right or left-handed, they're two-handed. Because they will always say, on one hand, I believe the market's going to go up. On the other hand, I'm worried about the economy. And economics is a dark science. So the longer time period you try to forecast, the error rate goes way up. And I think we'd probably all as a group agree, my staff and the consultants, that even a 1-year economic forecast has barely got a 50-50 chance of being correct. And the minute you get out 3 and 5 years, Alan would probably always say, the one thing you can be certain is they're wrong. We just don't know the degree to which they're wrong. So that's the hard thing, but that's also why we're not as confident in active management.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, thank you, Mr. Ellman, for your report. We have a guest speaker at 2:30, but I'm going to take a moment of privilege in my position. As most of you all know, I'm a big sports fan. And I believe in teams, and I think great teams have some things in common. Great teams, great organizations have great ownership. They have great general managers. They have great head coaches. They have great players, and they play for the fans. And CalSTRS is very fortunate to have a great head coach in our investment staff in Mr. Christopher Ailman. And in the time that I've been on CalSTRS boards, about 8 years, Chris reminded me when I came on the board that, I had 260 billion reasons to have new friends.
160 back then.
160, wishful thinking. But what Chris didn't know, that a kid from Queens realized that it all changed. That I knew I didn't really have that many friends. Never will, never really want to. I just need a few good ones. And now we got 210 billion reasons. We went from 160 to 120. And Chris has been here for 15 years. And whether or not you've seen Chris being pursued by Eric Shaster for Bloomberg News, or David Faber at CNBC, or sitting at the PPI conference where he's considered the thought leader, the elder statesman for CIO institutional investment officers from across the Pacific, or whether you're sitting at the Milken Global Conference and he's facilitating a forum in which trillions of dollars are in the room and he's leading the conversation. But more importantly, if you watch him interact with the retired teachers or the active teachers, it's the same guy. It's the same guy. That's leadership. He knows who he is. So we wanted to take a moment today, Chris, even amongst all of my superstitions. I defer to somebody who is smarter than myself, and that's Ms. Dillon. And we wanted to recognize you today, Chris. And we'll read this plaque to you. We're going to present this to you on behalf of the board. And it reads the following. And there are some key words in this, on this plaque. It reads, "On behalf of the Teachers Retirement Board and the Investment Committee, presented on June 7th, 2017, with special recognition and gratitude. Gratitude. To Christopher J. Ellman, Chief Investment Officer, 200-plus billion portfolio, congratulations. Thank you for your loyal and long-standing commitment to securing the retirement future for CalSTRS members and our beneficiaries. Since joining the investment branch in October of 2000, your progressive and strategic leadership has contributed to the steady rise of our portfolio. And because of your foresight and industry expertise, the retirement fund broke previous records by exceeding $200 billion in the spring of 2017, only the second fund in America to cross $200 billion. But most importantly, Chris, underneath it all, it says, on to Cincinnati. On to Cincinnati. So come on up, Chris. And there's a little shirt for his biking. Chris, can you just explain on to Cincinnati for the audience, please? Because it does say it on the plaque.
Thank you very much. I'm blown away. I'm not announcing my retirement.
No,
Unless I guess this is a clue.
no, please.
Closed session.
Close.
So, thank you very much. I am really touched. This is very, very kind and wonderful. Thank you. I think you know what I'm going to say is the credit for the $200 billion is all the people behind me. You know, the most important assets that you have are not the $200 billion in the bank. They're actually the 150 investment officers that come in and out of these doors every day, because it's their hard work that has caused this fund to perform so well. So I stand and applaud you guys. It really has been their work, and all the people on the 14th and the 15th floor know it. So on to Cincinnati. Harry, pretty regularly, like 3 or 4 times a month, will say that to me. It has to do with Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. They had played a Monday night game, or a Sunday night game, I guess it was, in Kansas City, where they just stunk the place up, got slaughtered. And everybody kept grilling him about, you know, is Tom Brady too old? Is the team too old? This and that. The next team they were going to play the following week was Cincinnati, who was like undefeated at the time. And Belichick, in his inevitable style, maybe I should start wearing hoodies. No. Was just constantly kept saying to every question, like, is Tom Brady
Finished.
too old? Is he finished? He would just look at the reporter and say, on to Cincinnati. On to Cincinnati. In other words, just keep your eye on the horizon. That year, the New England Patriots did turn it around and won the Super Bowl yet again. So it's kind of just a good point, which is even, you know, and I say it to you, we focus so much on the month, the quarter, the year, but we care about 30 years. You know, 1 year is like a mile in a marathon. So it's, for us, thank you. This is a milestone. It's nice to beat it, but we want to even see it and exceed it and double this fund even more. So I am very honored. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
So it's not on to Cincinnati, but it's on to our next item, which our guest speaker. We're very fortunate to have Frank Blake here, the former CEO of Home Depot. I had the privilege of hearing Mr. Blake speak last year at a conference. I was very impressed by his leadership, his humility, and what he was able to accomplish with the right people at Home Depot. And speaking with Ann, we were able to coordinate and have Mr. Blake with us today. So I'll turn it over to Ann and Frank.
Thank you. Thank you, Harry, and members of the Investment Committee. So we are very lucky today, as Harry said, to have Frank Blake here with us, who is the former CEO and chairman of Home Depot. Frank served at Home Depot when one of our activist managers, Relational, what's that? Yes, my mic is on. Can you not hear me? Okay, I'll speak close. So Frank is here today to share his experience at Home Depot. I think, as most of you know, David Batchelder, who was with Relational for many years, our original governance manager, for those old timers here around the room, took a position in Home Depot, went on the board, and Frank's going to give us a little bit of experience that he had with David Batchelder, as well as one of our other colleagues, Bonnie Gatan Hill, who was on the board of Home Depot. And for those of you, Bonnie is the one that we just put on the board of Bank of California in our engagement with them about a month ago or 6 weeks ago. Anyway, Frank was CEO of Home Depot from 2007 to 2014. Prior to that, he had some executive positions with Home Depot and with General Electric. And prior to that, he was, as we were talking today, we served together in the Reagan administration, and he stayed to serve in the Bush administration, the Department of Energy, and some other positions in Washington, D.C. Since his retirement, he's on the board of Procter & Gamble, on the board of Macy's, and on the board of Delta Airlines. So in addition to his remarks today about being a sitting CEO, running a large company, and engagement with shareholders, I hope that he will share a little bit about now transitioning to the role of a director. And I think some of the board members will have questions for him. He's going to take about 10 or 15 minutes and do a little bit about Home Depot, and then we will open it up to questions from the board. And then also I've got a few that I may tee up for him. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And it was great to hear the discussion about On to Cincinnati. I come from New England, so that was a terrific intro, and also this is informed for me to say thank you to all of you, because as you'll hear as I go through a little bit of the Home Depot story, and hopefully the person can follow me here because I'm gonna shorten it a bit from what I had planned. But it's a thank you because we benefited so much from at the Home Depot. David Batchelder was on our board, was a phenomenal board member. We also interacted a lot with Ralph Whitworth, and it created a lot of value for the associates in Home Depot and the shareholders of Home Depot. What I thought I would do is I would start very quickly with a little bit of the Home Depot story. I'm sure all of you, let me make sure this works. Okay, I'm sure all of you know Home Depot. You're in the stores probably pretty much all weekend. But for those of you who aren't, you know it's a very, very large retail organization, over 2,200 stores in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Now, on a seasonal basis, over 400,000 associates, nearly $95 billion in revenue, a market cap of over $180 billion. Yet it is a very, very young company. Now, I was going to show a video of the founding, but I'm going to pass over that. But I will say, the thing to know about the founding of the Home Depot is it was founded when Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank were fired from their prior jobs running home improvement retailing. And they went out and with the financial support of Ken Langone, founded the Home Depot in the late 70s. Let me see if we can move through without doing the video. So there we go. Then, after the founding, the Home Depot was the single most successful retail concept in American history. The fastest to 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion, 40 billion, 50 billion. This company just grew at an extraordinary pace through the late 1970s through to the year 2000. At that point, the board of the Home Depot decided that they needed to bring in professional management, somebody who would, bring order to all of this growth. And I'm trying to get the clicker to work here.
It's just slow today.
Oh, it's just slow.
Point at the screen, it'll get it there, I think.
You got it. And they brought in Bob Nardelli. Bob Nardelli had just lost out in the race to succeed Jack Welch as the head of GE and was viewed as one of the best operational leaders in the country and was brought in to run the Home Depot. Go through these just quickly. At the beginning, great accolades. This is working great. The GE culture, the Home Depot culture. And what happened over time was that those two cultures were an interesting clash, and that's probably another story in itself about corporate cultures and what transitions work and what transitions don't work. I'll wait for the screen to catch up. All of you, to the extent you follow corporate governance issues, are probably very aware that in addition to the operational issues that Home Depot started to run into, we were getting outcomped by our competitors, Lowe's, which I'm sure you've never been in one of their stores, but if you were to go in one of their stores for the 2000s, they were doing better than the Home Depot in terms of sales growth. There was a lot of operational pressure on Home Depot as well as governance pressures, and culminating most notoriously in 2006, where the Home Depot had a board meeting in which none of the other board members were there. There was a clock at the front of the room that gave everybody a minute, and then the microphones were turned off, and it generated this New York Times article, among others, and a lot of distress amongst people who follow corporate governance in terms of what the Home Depot was doing on governance. In addition, the Home Depot attracted the attention of relational investors and folks like yourselves. It should be on the next chart.
Can you guys turn the page?
There we are. Okay. And right around December, this ultimately Relational did not have a proxy contest because in the beginning of January 2007, literally January 2nd, 2007, the board and Bob Nardelli parted ways with a very significant payday that also attracted a lot of attention. And I was named the CEO. And as background for that, I would say the first thing you should understand is that people actually, one investor called me and the name kind of stuck, the accidental CEO. This was no one in the Home Depot expected that I would be the CEO, least of all myself. This was not something even at night, you know, if you're driving along a dark road, you think, what would I do if I were running this company? Never occurred to me that I would be the CEO of the Home Depot. And yet, you know, the board gave me a call at the end of the year, 2006, and said, we're parting ways with Bob. Would you be the CEO? I said, you need to think about this because you might want to find somebody with more retail experience. I actually am a lawyer by training and had worked at GE doing M&A transactions and was, while I was at Home Depot, I wasn't really involved in the retail business. In addition to coming on board pretty much unprepared, very much unprepared as a CEO, for those of you who remember 2007, we also were in the midst of the housing crisis. This was a chart I showed. My very first analyst conference was in February of 2007, and it showed private fixed residential investment as a percent of GDP, which is an interesting statistic to look at for housing, and it showed that it was starting to decline as of the back half of 2006, which gave me some leverage to say things might be getting worse. I had no idea. I showed this chart then, 2007, actually I showed it in every analyst conference I had thereafter, and you can see that there's a 60-year average of 4.8% of GDP being spent on housing. As of the third quarter in 2010, it got below any prior 60-year low, set a new 60-year low of 2.2%. So both a very new CEO and a collapsing market We had our priorities set out. I'm not going to go through with you each of what we knew we needed to fix in the business. We knew we needed to get our associates more engaged, make them feel more taken care of, have more product excitement, better supply chain, better shopping environment, and own the pro. More importantly, and this is where Relational really stepped in and was a huge help, as important, the things we did were the things we stopped doing. And one of the things I learned from David was a focus on capital allocation and thinking about where we were applying our capital for the highest results for our shareholders. That led us, as you can see, right at the start in February 2007. And by the way, we asked David to join the board a couple of weeks later in February. But they were fully supportive of this in advance. So right off the bat, we decided to sell a business that we had been building up over time called Home Depot Supply. It still exists. It's HD Supply now. We had built it into a $12 billion business, the largest commercial and industrial distribution chain in the country. So we sold that. There was some drama around the sales, as these charts will show if we get to them, just because the banking industry was also having a problem and we had to take a haircut to do this spinoff. And I'm just going to talk and the charts will catch up to us. There we go. We also had a number of different formats. So if you're in the retail business, you talk a lot about, okay, what's the next format? And the unspoken reality is it's very unusual for any retailer to have more than one successful format. They're very, very different businesses. We had, at the time, we had an Expo. Some of you may remember Expo. Yeah. We had high-end.
I love that stuff.
Well, so this was, so just a side note, lots of people loved the Expo store, but unfortunately, they loved it to look at things and not buy things. So, we shut our Expo stores. We had lighting stores. We had flooring stores. We had small hardware stores. We had all these different kinds of formats that all were capital allocation issues. We shut them all. And then most importantly, if we go forward here, we closed a few stores, not that many, but we closed some stores. Most importantly, and this was a huge assist from the Relational folks, is we were the very first retailer that basically said, we're not building any new stores anymore. And we took, at the time, what was a very, that seems to be, yeah, more stores shut. We took what, at the time, was a very shocking step of taking a $500 million write-off of clearing out our entire new store development pipeline. So all, because you can imagine real estate transactions take a long time, we shut them all down. It had a number of implications for the business that were very positive. The first was it was a much better capital allocation decision, but also for the company, it made us focus on, okay, if you're not going to grow, as most retailers at the time were growing, if you're not going to grow through square footage, how are you going to grow? Well, you have to grow by making your stores better, which is what we did. We set out a strategic framework, and for those of you who are familiar with Jim Collins' Good to Great, which is, I think, probably the best business book ever written, this is shamelessly stolen from him. But there are three great questions every company needs to ask and answer. What do you care passionately about, in Home Depot's case, customer service? What do you want to be the best in the world at, and what drives your economic engine? Back to the input of Relational, when you take these questions seriously, they provide interesting discipline to your business. So, going a little off script, if you think about most companies that are successful start as a brilliant answer to a customer problem. And as they grow, they become less interested in solving the customer problem than in solving their own problem. You have the same development in terms of wanting to be the best. If you take wanting to be the best seriously, there are a limited number of things you actually do, because you can only be the best at one or two things. To give you a great example of where David Batchelder and Relational provided help for us was, like many other retailers, we had a credit card. We have a private label credit card. We still have a private label credit card. Our deal at the time on the private label credit card was a risk-sharing deal. In other words, if the card started performing badly, that was bad news for Home Depot. If it performed well, it was good news for Home Depot. And this was back in late 2007, 2008. David's question was, well, why would any shareholder think that the people at Home Depot are expert at running a card receivable business? And it doesn't take too long to go, well, no, actually, that isn't our expertise. For that reason, we restructured our deal with the card company at the start of 2008 to basically give us no downside and dramatically restrict our upside. But our view was, hey, look, we're doing this as a customer service. This is less a money-making item for us than it is a customer service. That had the unintended benefit of, well, then that business then went to hell in a handbasket when the banking crisis hit. And had we still had that deal that we had with our card provider, it would have been a huge issue for the Home Depot. So the discipline that you get by focusing intensely on what you want to be the best in the world at is hugely important. Similarly, what drives our economic engine, we completely changed it. And again, this is something where Relational was very helpful. It had been building new stores, and we shifted it to how we make our existing stores better. So very quickly, to brag on the results, we were pleased that we turned around our comp sales. You all know retailers measure themselves on comp sales. We turned that around in 2010, actually before the housing market turned. We've had consistently strong comp growth for the last 7 years. Our earnings per share has had consistently strong growth. I'm very proud of this market cap chart. You see it stops at 145. That's when I left at the end of 2014. It's continued to go up, but if you look back, we had a $50 billion market cap. We bought back $50 billion in shares over the next several years and had a $150 billion market cap, and now it's 180. So very proud of that record. Also, I suspect this is another bragging chart on we're now doing better than Lowe's. We've consistently out-comped Lowe's. All the financial metrics are better than Lowe's. We get to the next chart, so very proud of that. Then I'm going to just spend 2 more minutes about more broad learnings, more sort of leadership, how you think about company learnings. As I mentioned, when I became the CEO of the Home Depot, this was a surprise. And if you go into every retailer and if you wonder what happens in break rooms, so you know there are break rooms in the back of retailers where the hourly associates have their lunch. We put TVs in there that we force them to watch. Most of them figure out how to turn it off. But we have the TVs in that give company news and information. So the next day, I have to go on TV to talk to 350,000 associates about, okay, now you got a new CEO and no one really knows who I am. Fortunately, my son actually was a store manager at the Home Depot. Home Depot had a program where returning veterans from Iraq could start to work in a store. My son had done that, actually started in Colorado Springs near his base, worked his way assistant store manager, and he was a store manager at the time. And first I called him and I said, I'm going to be the new CEO. And he said, wow, good luck, Dad. And then I said, well, what do you think people would like to hear? And he said, well, I can tell you how I start my store manager meetings. I start my store manager meetings by reading from Built from Scratch, which is a great book that was written by Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank about the entrepreneurial story of the Home Depot, I read from Built from Scratch at the start of every store meeting. I said, that sounds like a great idea. So I madly flipped through the book to try to find an appropriate page. And I land on, they have a discussion about the inverted pyramid. And so that's what I talked about. And there wasn't, to be honest, I had not given that a whole lot of thought. It seemed like the right thing to say. You know, there's a servant leadership concept. The nature of retail is, though, once I said, talking about the inverted pyramids started showing up in every break room around the country. And for the next 8 years as CEO, I spent time thinking about what does it really mean to lead from an inverted pyramid perspective. And I'm not going to go through in detail, but I believe this is one of the most profound leadership concepts in existence. It implies, first, the CEO, the leadership team, when you're at the bottom of the pyramid, you understand that is a weight-bearing position. Integrity is absolutely essential. If you don't have integrity, the whole thing collapses. You can't have split loyalties. Attitudinally, it is all uphill. There is no taking a break. There's no, hey, let's go and play golf. Everything that you're doing to impact your frontline associates and your customers, it's an uphill effort. It's not, you write notices and memos and things flow downhill. As a team, when you think about your team and what you want from your team, you want people who are multipliers, people who radiate energy, because you've got to get what your message is, what your vision is, up through the organization. Additive won't do it in an inverted pyramid world. Colin Powell has a great phrase. He says, optimism is a force multiplier. You need force multipliers in your organization. Demands, listening and communicating. This is hugely important. The joke about, you know, you have 200 billion friends. Bernie Marcus, our founder, had a great comment to me early on when I was CEO. He said, you're going to find that when you tell a joke to your staff, everyone laughs. And he said, let me tell you, you're not funny. And the point is, look, any position of responsibility, people tell you what they think you want to hear. If you ask generally, if I go into a store, a Home Depot, and ask, how's everything going? The only intelligent response is, it's going great, you're wonderful, please leave. That's what a normal person wants. So listening is a contact sport. If you think about it from an inverted pyramid, you have to really be sitting down and talking and genuinely listening to people's concerns and interests, particularly at the front line and customer level. Communicating. You need to understand that your communications don't flow down. They have to move up through osmosis. So your communications have to be simple. They have to be memorable. They have to be repeatable up through the organization. And then finally, what holds this all together is recognition and celebration. So we all know as business people the phrase, you get what you measure. I believe it. It's true. You get what you measure. I would add to that, and every time you look at a company, ask them what they recognize and celebrate, because you get what you recognize and celebrate. What people see within the organization is held up and recognized. It's so wonderful that you were recognizing your chief investment officer. That's just, I assume, what he does. But it is the glue of an organization is recognition and celebration. You can't do it enough. You can't do it intentionally enough, and you can't do it often enough. And then I think I've got sort of one last. I'm gonna just show this video because it's a fun video. So we did a lot of recognition and celebration events. And with that, all right, thank you is important.
My daddy.
We sent this to all of our associates internally, not an external.
My dad helps people build stuff and fix stuff. My dad makes stuff out of wood. Goes out and helps the community. Builds houses of people from the war. Que ayuda a las personas. He fixes stuff. He's the boss. He'll see someone walking in and he'll probably hold the door open for them. He volunteers to make children's playgrounds that don't have them.
He brings out the good in me.
And he's usually always smiling.
Tell me about your mom. What's so special about your mom?
She likes to help people. She tells people good job, what they're doing. She helped the veterans.
She works really hard.
I love my mom. In Joplin, a big storm happened. My grandma helps people after the tornado.
Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast.
It blew away houses and knocked on trees. My dad started helping people. Helps them get their house back together. They put it on top of the houses. You hammer things, bam, 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 to make it look pretty.
So where does your mom work at?
Works at a big orange place. A big orange and white building. My mom works in the front. The garden center. In plumbing, my mom and dad both work at Home Depot. Home Depot. She works at the Home Depot. Do you work at the Home Depot? Yes. My dad's a good man.
I don't know what my life would be like without him.
And he's my favorite hero. This heart's for my dad. I'm proud of you, Dad. I'm proud of my mom. I'm proud of my dad. I'm proud of my parents. Estoy orgullosa de mi papá. I'm proud of my mom. I'm proud of what my dad does. I'm proud of my mom and dad.
We take care of our customers. We take care of each other. We roll up our sleeves and help every chance we get. Thanks.
So, thank you to all of you, because you all, as investors and through Relational, made a very big difference to the Home Depot and to the hundreds of thousands of associates who work at Home Depot. It's a wonderful organization. It's a wonderful company. And I'll just add one other comment about Relational's input. Sometimes people go, gee, if you have an activist investor on your board, it's going to be all about dollars and cents and taking costs out. One of my biggest advocates on the board in terms of making sure our associates were well paid and recognized and thanked for the hard work they did was David Batchelder. And that's what you have to do in a business. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Open up to questions.
So we obviously do a lot of work with Ann's team, and she represents us across the globe on corporate governance issues. And often we're highlighting areas that we see corporations need to be improved to enhance shareholder value. And often we're calling out executives who are not demonstrating the highest of corporate behavior. And I've said to Ann, I've said to others over the last few years, I think it's time we shine a light on the real bright stars in corporate America, because it's a reciprocal relationship. There are great corporate global citizens in the world. And I think you can see why I worked with Ann, and Ann really delivered bringing Mr. Blake here with us today. So thank you for your great stewardship and your leadership, not only at Home Depot, but the presence and impact that you've had on lots of people's lives. So I'm going to turn it over to the committee for questions, or let Ann tee up a few. Okay. Yep. Ms. Hendricks.
First of all, thanks so much for coming, Mr. Blake. We're really glad and thankful for your son's service to our country. And a couple questions, because I really love that inverted pyramid. And I think what Ann has brought and her team has brought to our attention, and it's something that kind of keeps me awake at night, because I teach at a community college in a low-income area of Los Angeles, and I work with a lot of undocumented students and students who are working 2 or 3 jobs just to kind of pay the rent, the exorbitant rent in Los Angeles. And I'm wondering, with the issues that you raised about, how you pay workers and CEO pay, and how do you see this idea of the inverted pyramid maybe being influenced in other companies? Because I think one of the issues we face is just with the financial industry, the exorbitant CEO pay, and then obviously kind of workers sort of at the bottom rung not being paid, I think, an adequate wage to be able to afford to live And do you see, it seems like you've been a good example of helping to change that tide. How do you see other companies that you interact with, or maybe even with Delta and Macy's, that conversation changing, so there's more income equality and more fair treatment of workers, if you will?
So I'll give maybe an indirect answer to the question, but it's one that I deeply believe. When I got the job as CEO for the Home Depot, as I mentioned, I had worked at GE, and mentioned that. I had worked at GE before, and I had ended up as a direct report to Jack Welch. And I put in a call to Jack, and I said, would you spend a day with me, because I need CEO 101, and he was very nice, and he did. And we did that then every single year through 8 years. In the 8th year, I asked the question that, you kind of always want to ask, but it's too dumb, so you want to wait until you know you're not going to be doing this again. So I said, okay, Jack, if you had to boil down what is the single most important characteristic of a leader, what is it? What's the answer? And his answer was, I think, both absolutely right and also surprising in a way. And he said, generosity of spirit. The most important thing about a leader is generosity of spirit. And in my view, in a company, the way I would talk about Home Depot for our hourly associates was that my job was to generate wealth for them. That was my job. My job was, now we have very much that culture in Home Depot. You started as an hourly worker, you were shagging carts in the lot, you were a cashier, but you worked your way up to a department head, an assistant store manager, store manager. 80% of our store managers started as hourly associates. 75% of our district managers started as hourly associates. The opportunity that you're providing people is the great, now I have a passion around retail. That I don't know, other industries have a more difficult job of doing that, but retail is such an amazing vehicle for getting people to improve their lives, and it is in the end the most exciting thing about the job as a CEO. And people, I don't know that everybody always understands that, but they should, because the most exciting thing will be all the careers, so I just give one other story, because it's, there are things that are etched in your mind over that period of time. Towards the end, we scheduled a lunch with Bernie Marcus, one of our founders, and Ken Langone, one of our founders. And for a variety of reasons, they were in sort of a bad mood when we started the lunch, and there were 50 hourly associates around the table. And I was going, boy, this is not going well. And they sat down to lunch, and everybody was introducing, it wasn't 50, I guess it was about 30 people, and everybody was introducing themselves around the table. And it was person after person saying, I want to say thank you, because but for you, I wouldn't have been able to send my kids to school. I want to say thank you, but for you, I wouldn't have been able to buy a house. They were more uplifted by that conversation. I was more uplifted by that conversation than anything else. And so my answer, my broader answer to your question is that all the leaders anywhere need to understand that the most important characteristic they have to have is generosity, and wanting to being excited about the success of others.
Yeah. Well, and the theme I keep hearing you talk about is the human capital. It's the investment in your the workers.
In retail, it's really simple. In retail, you can't expect your associates to take care of their customers if you're not taking care of them. It is just not a realistic expectation. So it's but at some level, every business has that inverted pyramid. And if the people who touch your customers don't feel like the company cares about them and are taking care of them, it's not going to be a good experience.
Anyone else for a question, comments? Mr. Unterman?
That was a wonderful presentation. Thanks for coming and spending some time with us. So retail in 2017 has its issues.
It's a different world.
What is your perspective? And I guess Home Depot is a little bit different than clothing, but or some of the other things that are more susceptible to home delivery. But what's your perspective on what we'll think about retail 5 years from now?
Clearly, retail goes through massive changes. And you can see it, Sears was a massive change when it hit. Walmart and all the big boxes were massive changes when we hit. The internet and Amazon is a massive change. I happen to believe that it still goes to what's the experience in the store. That as powerful as the internet is, there is space for physical retailers, and they've just got to keep improving their game. And the presentation I would give at Home Depot to we'd bring in new assistant store managers for, sort of our version of orientation. And I would say, look, there's an interesting book out, and the book is called, and now it's old, it's been out for 3 or 4 years, but the book is called Eat People. And the concept of the book is that all the big, great business models in the future will be like the FANG stocks, will be the people that employ the fewest number per revenue generated. For every retailer with bricks and mortar, that means that every single customer who crosses the threshold of the store is critical to the future of that company. Internalizing that threat is one of the things that the retailers who do that, understand that, and move forward with that are still going to succeed. And the people who don't, won't. But I suspect you've all had that experience of, hey, this is a great experience at a retail store, and you'll go back, and you've had an experience that says this isn't good, and now there's an alternate. And it used to be that you just had to be better. You had to provide a better experience than the other person down the block. Now you've got to provide a better experience than just sitting on your sofa and ordering something. But good retailers can do it.
Ms. Higa?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I also really enjoyed hearing your views on leadership. Your customer base, I think, is a very diverse one. And, seeing the video that you show, your employees, your workforce is also very diverse. Diversity in leadership and in boards is something that's been a priority for us under Ann's leadership with the corporate governance program. So I wonder if you could share, some of your views or experience looking at those issues in either your senior leadership at Home Depot or with your board.
We're very, a point of real pride at the Home Depot for me was we both had a diverse workforce and we had a diverse leadership team that reflected the diverse workforce. And it reflected the diverse workforce because for all the right reasons, it reflected the diverse workforce. I think boards have, different boards have different opportunities on that. But there's a part of a board function of you want to see diversity on your board because you want the people within the company to understand that the board is reflective of society as well as the company.
Other questions? Just take a nice photo of this board. It's pretty diverse.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you looked at Chris's team, pretty diverse. So very proud of the fact that we walk the walk here at CalSTRS, both on this side of the dais and on that side of the dais, which is great. Ann, do you have any questions for Mr. Blake before we finish up?
A couple of quick ones. And first, thank you for the presentation, because I think one of the things that's helpful to really hear Frank's experience and the experience at Relational and some of our other managers is, as Chris has said before, we owned the stock before Relational went in, and when they were there, we own it while they were there, and now we own it, and it's a large holding in our global equity, and so we benefit from the work that they have done, because we're going to own the index forever. So it's beneficial and it's helpful for us to have these catalysts in the companies when there is a company that could use a bit of improvement in terms of that. I guess now that you've transitioned to boards, how do you see, what are the 2 or 3 things that, for an investment fund like ours, and for my group, the corporate governance, the role of the board members now? And how do you see the transition that you have made from a CEO now inside the boardroom, and the role that the board plays overseeing the management?
One of the things that was really helpful interacting with David was the board plays a critical role in capital allocation and also in human resource allocation. But capital allocation is, if a company, if things are going well, the company's strategy and its capital allocation are aligned. Interestingly, and aligned in terms of providing the best result for the shareholders as well as the employees in the community. Interestingly, what happens over time is they get out of alignment because things are easier to start than stop, and things kind of take on a life of their own, whether they make sense in changed circumstances or not. I know that was the case at Home Depot. I can see that as the case in other companies, that the closeness, when you're working, when you're on the management team and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you don't necessarily notice, well, gosh, why are we doing that? I mean, just like that example on the credit card, it wasn't, my reaction to it wasn't, well, bug off, we're brilliant at running credit cards. My reaction was, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Why are we doing that? And so that's the kind of thing that I think board members effectively engaged in the company can do, is they can ask the question that that's just become part of the backdrop and is less obvious when you're at it every day.
Then in closing, the 2 other things I would say, and I had a discussion with David the other day, and he's shared with us the wonderful experience. But 2 things, and I think you hear my staff talk about this as we talk about engagements, and I think Frank touched on them, is the importance of capital allocation. And one of the issues we look at, we talked about the appropriateness of share buybacks, when it's appropriate, when companies are doing it, and we follow that. And the other thing that I think was important at Home Depot, and Frank touched on this, is the proper executive compensation and the proper metrics and the changes. David talked a little bit about, and I know you touched on it, changing, people do what they're incented to do, and getting the right metrics in place. I don't know if you want to touch a little bit on that before we close.
No, that's a huge learning, and you need to obviously look at the proxy very carefully, because, and this was not, I don't know who had the expression, David Batchelder or Ralph Whitworth, but it's a great expression, stuck in my mind, has stayed in my mind. Okay. At one point, we were talking about, herding cats, and the comment was, yeah, herding cats is tough, but you can move their food. So, when you think about that, you go, oh, okay, I got it. If I want this behavior and the alignment on the team, and we actually did that. So when we identified, these are, we went back and there were those 5 things we put on a list of things we had to do. We aligned people's compensation around it. So if you're really serious about it, compensate. And don't expect to get what you're not paying people for, or expect to get what you are paying them for. And that was a big learning that's carried through. It's really worth spending time on, truly, what are we incentivizing folks to do?
We take one last question from Chris.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm very honored, I have to say. And as I said, the credit all goes to my staff. I totally believe in that inverted pyramid. And if I had any talent in it, it would be from God. But my question to you is, back on governance, when we have shareholder votes for boards of directors, as you know, the vast majority is voted by the broker-dealers and approved. When you're on a board, you're on the Macy's board and on Delta, Procter & Gamble, do you pay attention to the withhold vote? And when it's only 10 or 20%, but does that still get a director's attention?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so,
So-
go ahead.
No, thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. We really appreciate it. It's very helpful so that the board can understand some of the sort of ground game that we play in engaging with the companies. And I appreciate his comments on both capital allocation and executive comp, because we spend a lot of time reading the proxies, going through and analyzing as we do our corporate governance work. I had to laugh because David mentioned Ralph's comment also about herding cats.
Yeah.
So great. Hey,
that's a real
it sticks
jewel.
with you for the rest of your life.
That
You'll
is a
always
jewel.
remember that one.
I think we're gonna be hearing that.
Thanks again, Mr. Blake.
thank
Safe
you.
travels back. We're going to take a break until 20 to 4. We'll start at 20 to 4.